I mean, how much do you feel like you're just like falling back on your instincts that are honed over the years?
I rarely really think.
Welcome back to the Free Code Camp podcast. I'm Quincy Larson, teacher and founder of freeCodeCamp.org. Each week, we're bringing you insight from developers, founders, and ambitious people in tech. This week, we are talking with ThePrimeagen. He is a software engineer. He worked at Netflix up until recently for quite a while, and now he's focused full-time on live streaming coding on Twitch and on other places, and just, talking about coding, showcasing his skills. Welcome, man. How's it going?
It's going well. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic, man. It's great to talk to you. I am a longtime viewer of your YouTube videos. I don't watch Twitch because I like to do everything at double speed, but I've enjoyed some of your takes over the years, especially on some of the AI related things. Yeah.
Okay. I feel like I personally have great takes on AI.
Yeah. Well, we're going to talk about some of those. First, though, a lot of the people listening to this may not, even though you have a huge audience, like right before you were streaming this, I went over to Twitch and I saw that you had like more than 1,000 people watching you, working on some different projects. And like a lot of people obviously know who you are. You're a big deal in the programmer space, but a lot of people in the Free Code Camp community may not yet know who you are. So one of the things I like to do whenever I have somebody on is kind of go back and do their programmer origin story, and kind of get that out of the way before we launch into the many, many questions I have prepared for you. So yeah, maybe you could tell us a little bit about like who you were as a kid and who you looked up to.
As far as looking up to, I have a stack brain, so I answer things in reverse. So just be prepared for that. So if you ask more than one question, you will get a reversal. So as far as people who I looked up to, Jim Carrey was probably my number one person that I looked up to. Jim Carrey was absolutely just the coolest. As far as like what I did as a kid, I think my biggest claim to fame, my biggest accomplishment is when I was somewhere between the ages of 3 and 4, I beat Super Mario. I was really, really into playing NES. It just was something that from a very young age just spoke to me. I could in fact beat level 3 of Battletoads, the classic one that people can't beat, the speeder bike
scooter
one.
Yeah, the speed bike.
Yeah, the scooters where you jump on there and you go back and forth and you go, I could beat that at a very young age. Right when it came out, I could beat it right away. And fun story here, I got all the way up to level 7, Volkmeyer's Inferno, if I'm not mistaken. And I was like, oh man, that was so hard. And I was like 5 or 6 years old at that time, and I just couldn't beat it. And then at 21 years old, I bought an NES, and I bought Battletoads, and I'm like, I'm older, I'm faster, I'm wiser, I'm everything. Here we go. Got to level 8, and I was just like, oh my goodness, this game is so hard. And eventually I got pretty good at it, so I could speed run it. I was able to beat it in about 36 minutes, I think was
36
about
minutes.
the timing.
You beat the entire game in 36 minutes. That includes
I got
like
real
warps.
good at Battletoads.
I mean, did you use like the level 3 warp? There's like a special wall
I go all the way through.
Oh, so no warp.
Yeah, there's a bunch of walls. So on like level 1, if you headbutt the first 2 guys, you drop down, headbutt, go to the next one, headbutt, jump to the next scene. You'll go to level 3. On level 3, I think on the 10th gravestone, on the very, very fast ending part, you'll hit a warp to a level 5. On level 5, I want to say there isn't a warp. You just have to go through and surf. But on level 6, the snake level, there's actually one. If on the second snake room, if you sprint off the moment the first snake turns and becomes flat, you'll actually fall through a bunch of pokey things and not actually hit any of them and land right into a warp.
Interesting.
You can go all the way up to level 8. And so level 8 is about as far as I know where the warps are. I've never actually looked up any of these things. I just kind of discovered them all as someone who is just trying to get really fast at the game.
Yeah. I mean, that game is notorious for just its ridiculous difficulty and like the spike in difficulty. It was so inconsistent because level 1 and level 2 were not that hard. Then all of a sudden you get to the speed bike thing, and it's just like, as a kid, I got really frustrated. I paid like, $6, which back in like 1980s dollars was like $10, $15. And rented that game, and I was like, all right, I'm gonna have a great weekend. I'm gonna beat this game because I beat every other NES game that I rented, right? But no, that speed bike thing, I was banging my head against it, and I can't remember if there even continues in the game. But basically, you just run out of lives, and you're just like, damn, I have to play level 1,
it's
level 2
NES.
again.
There's no continue.
Yeah.
There's no save spots. There's no continues. It's just brutal. That's how it works.
Yeah, they call it NES hard.
It's like Elden Ring just without saving.
Yeah. Yeah, and Elden Ring without saving would not be very fun. There are people that can beat Elden Ring without taking a hit, or at least I'm not sure if it's for Elden Ring, but
without
for the other Souls games. Yeah.
I've heard about these no-hit playthroughs of the Souls game. I've never actually watched one or actually seen anyone do even part of it. I never actually got into the Souls game until Elden Ring. I didn't even know that was a category of games. Absolutely loved it. Speaks to my NES loving kind of nature. It is a game that is just most certainly something that I love. Challenge and difficulty and preciseness, because there's something that's really pretty about preciseness. You can't be off by any amount. It's just like it's really like a very constrained way to do something, but you can do it really fast, which makes it fun.
Yeah. I mean, like 8 frames to parry in a lot of cases, or if you have like the little mitten, you can parry with like slightly more frames. I love. I did play Elden Ring. My kids love watching me play Elden Ring, but I just I couldn't. It took too long to figure out where I was supposed to go. I like the Dark Souls 3 is my favorite of the Souls games. And it's because it's pretty clear where you need to go. Like the levels are pretty linear, and it's all about like just getting from one place to the next in combat. I encourage you to go back and try that if you haven't played Dark Souls 3.
I've never tried it.
Yeah.
All I know is I've only played Elden Ring, and when I played Elden Ring, I really just had no idea where I was going. It is extremely unclear what you have to do.
Yeah, and I think that's part of they're trying to recreate that like old early computer game kind of like experience of just you've got this instruction manual that doesn't help you at all.
The point is the game itself. Yeah. It's not to win, it's to play the game.
Yeah, absolutely. Dark Souls, though, I'm a huge fan of that series and of the designer and everything he's done to revitalize that kind of like Nintendo hard type, to frankly respect the audience. And yes, like it does become an accessibility issue when you have people who have, like motor skill impairments and other things, and it's simply just not accessible to those people. And he refuses adamantly to add like an easy mode to the game because he feels like that would compromise the integrity of the game. I mean, the easy mode to the game is you go and you like farm a whole bunch of XP and you become like overpowered at a lower level, and then you can kind of like skate through some of the early encounters. But I definitely respect that philosophy and that commitment to look, this game isn't for everybody. Yeah. So
I love it.
So playing a lot of really hard video games, looking up to Jim Carrey. Let's talk about Jim Carrey for a minute. Like that guy is super innovative. If you watch like the first Ace Ventura movie, like all the different impressions he's doing. What was it about him that drew you to him?
I don't know. I'm just like every other kid. I just thought he was hilarious. He was fantastic. Ace Ventura 2 When Nature Calls was like my favorite movie growing up, all that kind of stuff. So, oh no, whatever that is, it just was a natural thing. The Mask, absolutely fantastic. Ace Ventura 1 was fantastic. The tutu with him dancing on or getting freaked out by the bubble wrap, like that's it was all so fantastic.
Yeah. So I want to talk a little bit about your childhood, and again, I don't want to pry. I came from like a family. We were middle class, and I didn't have any early tragedies in my family. But I'm trying to like figure out a way to put this, but like you lost your father at a pretty early age, and you've talked about how that impacted you. But could you talk about how that maybe like changed your trajectory? Like, do you ever think of like a mirror universe of like what you would be like? Like if I don't know if you ever watched Star Trek, but like the Tapestry episode where Captain Picard like sees what his life would have been like if these certain events hadn't happened, and he's got this idealized version of his life, and then he's got the real life where he ended up being the captain, and that's the one that's marred with setbacks and bad judgment calls and all these other things that were just part of his exploration as a youth. Like, would you be cool with talking about that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So what is the specific question? Sorry, there's a lot to it. Is it that what would my life be like if it hadn't?
Well, yeah. Whether you think about that, and maybe
I do.
Yeah,
I do. Are you ready for an answer that might not be the answer you're ready for?
I am ready for anything, man.
All right. So have you ever read the book The Problem of Pain by C.S. Lewis?
I'm familiar with C.S. Lewis and his work. I haven't read that specific book.
Okay. It's probably his most meaty book, if meaty is the correct term for books. And it in the very beginning, it starts off with this idea where there's various canards in a life where it's like, is God so powerful that he himself can create a rock that he cannot lift? Right? Like it's stating a question which it's meant to be something you're supposed to think about, blah, 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 blah. And so when he talks about that, he talks about this idea of impossibility. So if something is impossible, what you're actually saying is that it is impossible, suppressed clause, unless, and then you change the situation. Meaning that it is impossible for me to see the road where I'm currently at unless if I were to leave the room I'm in and walk outside. So that's called an impossibility. It is impossible for me to see the road right now. And so you have the suppressed clause. An intrinsic impossibility is something in which there is no time, space, actor, or universe in which the impossible becomes possible. There is no suppressed unless clause because it cannot exist. And so I do not believe that there is any universe or time or situation that could have been conceived in some sense that would have changed the past, or for me to understand what that, what the outcome of that is. And so I think of it more like an intrinsic impossibility. So I don't actually think about what would my life be like if I were to have, because it changes it at such a fundamental level that there's no real point in thinking of it.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of like my general answer of like, what does it mean to have a dad? That, I can only answer in the affirmative of what does it mean not to have a dad growing up, which, there's a lot of difficulties. I'd say one of the hardest things that ever came about was when I was, I don't know, I'd say it's like maybe 22, 23 years old. I used the term dad for the first time that I could conceivably remember. That was strange. Right? That's not a situation that a lot of people maybe can recognize, but for me that was a very unusual thing. I think having kids has allowed me to understand what it's like to have a dad. So I don't get a dad, but I can understand what it's like to have a dad, and I can understand the importance of being a dad, but I can never understand what it's like to have one. I have no person in which I could feasibly have someone, because whether you like it or not, a mom will never be a dad will never be a mom. A kid growing up really just needs this kind of dynamic duo. My mom tried her best. She did a great job doing as the best she could do, but she could never be my dad. And there's just something about that has always been this like deep desire for me to have that side, and I just never ever got it. And that I know that it's missing, and that's it. And so I can't fill it. I can just vicariously observe it in my kids.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's effectively my life as growing up without it. A lot of hard things transpired because of it, but like I never had someone to tell me in kind of the way I needed to hear it that I was being an idiot. I never had someone that showed me how to do things in the way that I could, I guess, understand it.
Yeah. Were you able to find any other like people in your life, like teachers or other people that they could kind of serve even a fraction of that role?
No. My uncle physically abused me. My other uncle was in prison, so not necessarily any male side in my life that, was quality, if you will.
Yeah. Well, what got you interested in computers in terms of like you got really early on? You were interested in computers.
I'm laughing because that was just like such an intense 180 from where we were just going. Yeah.
Well,
what got me interested
I'm kind of
on?
thinking like just to articulate my thinking there, because I'm not like reading from a list of questions like that. That is my next logical question, because I don't know what else, frankly, there is to be said. And I don't want to denature what you just said by, oh, I'm sure everything worked out anyway and all that, jazz.
Yeah.
I just want to because computers were a big part of your life from a very early on period, from what I understand, from listening to lots of interviews with you, and watching your channel and stuff. And I mean, was that an escape, or was that just a way of channeling your energy? Because I mean, it sounds like you grew up in a pretty, adverse environment, like despite the best efforts of your mom?
I would say that video games were more likely the escape. Perhaps programming in some sense was that as well. I didn't really grow up doing programming or anything like that. I really enjoyed trying to install Doom and get that done and be able to play Doom. That was a great time. There's all these like little things that I didn't quite understand that I very much so enjoyed about computers. When I had a problem, I kept trying to figure it out, and it was very frustrating and it'd be very upsetting. But that's that was just part of life. We just had a computer. We had access to a computer really early on because before my dad passed, he was doing a startup. It's irony. Story at some point I'll tell later about my first startup, but for whatever reason, he was just too early to the startup. He had, if you remember 10.10.2 20 dial down the middle, I believe, or whatever it was called. There's some like dial down phone card type long distance situation he was doing in the late 80s, early 90s, which was just entirely too early for it to exist, really, because that didn't really come about until just a little bit later, maybe like 5 years later. That became a real thing people wanted, because cell phones were a rarity in the late 90s, early 2000s. They weren't nearly as common as they are now.
Yeah.
And so we just always had some access to a computer, and so I was always able to play around on a computer. And I played a lot of Mahjong Tile and Freeski and all that stuff in Windows 3.1. You had to start up DOS, and then in DOS you had to execute Windows to get it to run and all that. So I had like some basic early experience with computers, though I largely didn't understand anything. It wasn't until there's this video game called Grail or Graal, I'm not really sure, Graal. And and with it, they had a level editor, and I started playing with the level editor, and if you double-click on an NPC, it would actually load up some script, like some sort of Grail script, I think is what they call it. NPC script, not really sure, but it was a C-like syntax, and so I was able to look at it and effectively figure out what it's trying to say. And it's not, programming in itself, if you're sufficiently motivated, is not terribly hard to start figuring out. If it's a simple enough script, like Lua is a pretty simple enough script that I think you could eventually figure out everything about it. And so it was something simpler than Lua, very, very unexpressive. And so I just started looking and understood if statements and while loops and all that, and it was fun. So that's kind of that's like my early time into computers, and so I just really enjoyed doing that, building stuff.
Yeah, and Lua,
a lot of Warcraft 2 level editor.
Yeah, so you might be just programming kind of incidentally without even realizing you were programming with the higher objective of building a level or making NPCs do certain things. You kind of learn it en route to the goal of developing levels. Is that like
it's something like that?
Yeah.
I just wanted to build stuff, and so I could see I could build interactive things. So I just played around and kept trying to build interactive things.
Yeah, right on. Yeah, and my understanding is like a lot of people approach, me, and they're like, "Hey, does FreeCodeCamp have like a Lua course?" Because like that's one of the easier like languages to learn, and like I don't know if it's used in Minecraft. Minecraft, Roblox, like a lot of these.
It is used in Minecraft.
Yeah, a lot of these games, especially like massive online games, seem to like serve as a good gateway for kids to get into programming, right? And like I think
most games use Lua because Lua is an incredibly easy embeddable language. Like even an inexperienced embeddable person could probably embed Lua, the language. Like I've never embedded a single language in my lifetime. I could probably do it in an afternoon or two.
Yeah.
So I think that's why it largely works with a lot of game development and all that. It's really simple. Like embedding V8, extremely difficult. That might take me a year. Embedding Lua might take me a week.
Yeah, that's a good endorsement of Lua as like just like an accessible language people can add if they want to get like a community of creators around. And when I say creators, not necessarily like YouTube creators, but like people just creating levels, right? My kids love making Mario Maker levels, for example. I don't want to like get too personal about your kids, but like, how old are they?
10 through 3. My daughter just turned 3 a couple days ago. So 3, 6, 8, and 10.
Yeah. So they're probably in that age. Like, do you allow them to play video games and stuff? Like a lot. Like we have a rule that we don't let our kids play video games on weekdays. But yeah,
pretty much same thing. We don't do weekdays. We try not to do too much. They just turn into little. I'm not sure what other term to use other than shitheads. They just like it's like when you give them too much sugar, it's just emotionally brittle. They become very emotionally brittle when you let them play too many video games. Just like if I veg out and do something and watch too much TV, I find everything to be inconvenient. It's the same thing, except for I just have the emotional wherewithal to kind of, push through it, whereas they're still so young. It's very difficult for them to understand what it takes to live a regular life. And so if you let them play too many video games, obviously things kind of go off the rails. And so, we do some weekend time. Like, we'll play Fortnite. The kids love playing Fortnite with me, so we'll all load up into Fortnite and go run around and shoot stuff. And since it's largely like my 10-year-old and my 8-year-old, and they're not that very good, and I can play. I used to play a lot of Fortnite, and it's like now just a lot of bots or really bad people. It'll be like I'll get like 25 kills in a game, and I'm just like, man, this is what it feels like to be like a pro Fortnite player playing with regular people, because it's just like so easy because it's probably all bots.
Yeah.
It's fun. We like it.
Yeah, that's cool. So video games have been a way for you to like kind of share your childhood passion with your kids, it sounds like.
Yeah. I rarely play them though, just because they became I'd say probably like a crutch or a coping mechanism. And it's not that I explicitly was like, oh, a crutch or coping mechanism. It's just that I just recognized if I wish to be really good at programming or really good at anything or do anything in life, I just kind of have to make time. And most of life is a choice of what do you get. I mean, we are fortunate enough to live in a day and age in which there's a huge amount of self-direction. And so with that comes both the joys and the pains of saying yes to doing something that may not feel as good and saying no to something that feels good in the moment.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like I could just sit and spend the weekend on the couch watching Netflix, for example, or I can go and like, compose a new song, or I can go make it to the gym, or any number of things that advance me closer to my goals. And yet we live in an age when like literally every movie, every song is like a few clicks away. Reddit's an alt tab away, and you're suddenly like seeing interesting cat photos and stuff like that. So like being able to manage yourself has become like a key skill if you want to achieve your goals and like I guess stand out from all the other people that have, I guess, less impulse control. I'm not sure if that's like the right way of saying it, but yeah, I see what you're saying.
I constantly say on the stream that people misdefine liberty or freedom quite often, which is that liberty is the ability to do what you want, or your higher will. And we often find, especially in our very quote unquote free world that we live in, that we find we're often just subjugated to our lower will, what feels good in the moment. Will you eat that extra cookie, or will you say no because you want to get in shape? Right? Like which will wins? Well, often you find that the lower will wins much, much more than the higher will. And so perfect liberty is the ability to know and say what you want and actually act upon that. And so if you want to, like, say, you have a large programming audience or a large newer wanting to get into programming audience, what is the answer? Do you say, I want to learn programming, therefore you learn programming? Or do you say, I want to learn programming like I say I want to learn Chinese? Which is just like some fictional want that not actually materializes into anything.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you really want to learn Chinese? Or you just... Is that
no.
just an example?
I say I want to learn another language, but it's just like the reality is I'm not going to learn another language. I say I want to. That's it. Yeah. I know I don't. I know I don't actually want to. We do what either our higher or lower will wants us to do. And right now, all effort and everything is pointed towards either is making what I'm doing right now a success.
Yeah. Well, this isn't like a philosophical podcast, so I don't want to delve too deep into this. But one question that like I like to ask people sometimes is like whether you think that people actually have potential. Do people have potential, or are people currently realizing their potential? Can
you say that? I don't quite know what that means. Can you say it in a different way?
Sure. So, for example, I could say, oh, I want to become a really good. I want to get really good at let's say like a contemporary language like Rust or something like that, and it'd be great to be a Rust player, like a Rust developer. And I know I have kind of a loose idea of what I need to do. I just need to sit down and do it. So I have the potential to become a great Rust developer, but am I actually going to invest the time? Like, is that potential actually like a latent property, or is it just, I could be spending my time right now learning Rust. There's a comprehensive Rust course on FreeCodeCamp. There's probably lots of other comprehensive interactive Rust courses out there that I could go through and I could learn that skill. Do you feel like people actually have potential, or is everybody realizing their maximum potential right now unless they change the status quo somehow? Does that make sense?
I'm not 100%. It doesn't make sense to me, but I'm going to try to say it in my way, and maybe you'll tell me how close I am. Are people actually living up to what they could live up to now, or is it all just whimsical ideas and we are really not quite being as great as we can?
Yeah, like, do we just tell ourselves there's the potential there when really, like, we lack the will to act? I apologize if I'm doing a bad job of structuring this question, but, like, the question has been posed
That's
to me
okay.
a number
Hold
of
on.
times.
I'm looking up a quote. Let's see. Dang it. I know that there's a really, really... give me just 1 second. It's a great quote.
All right. Well, I'll hold out for your zinger.
Here we go. I bet you I got this one. Here we go. I think this is a pretty good one. We are half-hearted creatures fooling about with drink and sex and ambition when infinite joy is offered to us, like an ignorant child who wants to go on making mud pies in a slum because he cannot imagine what it is meant by the offer of a holiday at the sea. We are far too easily pleased. C.S. Lewis. It's a great quote. Effectively, how I read this is that we settle for significantly less than we can actually achieve. I think that you can count how many times in a day that you decided to take the easy dopamine fast route as opposed to doing something that's going to actually affect your life in a positive way.
Yeah.
Like how much time is spent scrolling Instagram, scrolling Twitter, watching just cat videos. They don't actually give you anything, right? There's nothing out of that. I know people try to say, oh, it's how I relax. I somehow doubt that that's really how you relax. I think it's just a trained mentality because, I mean, you're telling me that all of life and all of humanity never got the chance to relax. Like, my real thing is that we've just built up patterns and habits that just numb us from the reality and difficulties of life, and we choose that over reality. I know that's a very intense statement, and you said you're not a philosophical podcast, but that's just kind of my kind of take on the world is that we just settle for. I know we're going to get into AI, but it's my biggest worry about AI, which is AI is there as this infinite teaching well that can help you get from A to B. And it is, theoretically, if you have the $40 a month, $30 a month, whatever it takes to do, to have ChatGPT for Omni, you have the ability to get all these great things. And instead, you're just going to ask it to solve all your problems. You're not going to take the route of becoming someone better. You're going to take the route of getting what you need answered. You'll become more helpless, not more wise by the end of using AI.
Yeah. Well, we could absolutely extrapolate that out to other tools like, Google search, as opposed to back in the day, knowledge was hard fought. I'd go to the librarian and I'd have to explain something. That librarian who has trained their entire life to be able to take my query and figure out, okay, what is going to help this person? And then, or maybe sends me over to the Dewey Decimal System, card files. And I'm going through a bunch of old microfilm, I'm scouring for the answer. And it's hard to get the answer there when, you can just go on Google and Google, no matter how half-hearted your Google query is, you are going to get some results, right? And it's easy to think that was great. I solved my problem. Google just gave me what I needed, right? And AI is going to be perhaps even easier to get, a serviceable solution, but that's not really what you needed. It's just what you told yourself that you needed because you didn't want to burn the extra calories to do the extra work. You didn't want to invest the extra time in doing exhaustive research. Yeah.
No, do you ever hear the story about how Unbroken, the book, was written? It turned into a movie as well. It's the same lady who wrote Seabiscuit, if I'm not mistaken.
Unbroken. I'm not familiar with it.
It's a very great story about Louis Zamperini, a World War II veteran who I believe is still alive to this day. Very, very old fella at this point. He's 90-something years old. He got caught in Japan flying over the waters, and he had to spend quite some time in a Japanese internment camp or labor camp or whatever they called it in Japan. And he also was an Olympic hopeful. He was someone that went out there and I think he ran the 400 or something, and he was likely slated to win the Olympics when he went. And so he had his whole life ahead of him, but he joined the military, was going to do 2 years, and then boom, out comes World War II and all that. And the story of the book goes that the lady, I forget her name. I literally have no idea what her name is. She is doing all this research for Seabiscuit, and she's just reading old newspapers. And reading old newspapers, she stumbles on this story that's like, oh, we found Louis Zamperini, and we were able to rescue him from one of these Japanese camps. And like, that's it. And she's like, oh, that's really interesting. Put a note on it. Went back there later, ended up spending 7 years to write this book. And it's like, wild success. But if you have the direct answers, well, this whole story goes to show that if you have the exact A to B, there's so much stuff that you miss. Like often the answer isn't just simply what you want to know. It's like that act of gathering it, going through things. And yes, it's like way inefficient. And yes, it's not, like you could certainly move faster if you could just get exactly what you wanted at that exact moment. But moving faster isn't like the goal always. It can't always be the goal. There's more to life than just moving fast.
Yeah. 100%. And people can delude themselves into thinking, oh, I'm doing so much. That's like the whole multitasking thing. That's people like trying to pack their schedule with like tons of conversations, like quick 20-minute meetings with like all these different people. And I'm sure you're familiar with this, having worked in tech, versus like, a substantial conversation. And I would argue that this podcast, even though hopefully we'll be able to talk for like 90 minutes or 2 hours or something, like it's really just a very brief conversation, considering like if you consider like a lifelong friendship that you have with somebody and like the things you learn from them over a longer period of time, and kind of the ongoing discussions and the ongoing themes, the undercurrents in your friendship and the things you do together, whether it's play together in a band, whether you're working on a software project together in pair programming periodically, like whatever it is, like greatness takes time, right? That lady, she needed to spend 7 years, even after she like filed that note away, like actually thoroughly researching it and then writing the book. Right. Yeah. And I do think that is something that we could lose. And I know I'm sounding like an old man shaking his fist at a cloud, but like really, like I do hope there's a return to form. And I hope that there are a lot of people who use these AI tools, not as crutches, but to further deepen the research rather than just shorten the research process. Yeah. I mean, I think it's good. I realized, because I tried to use ChatGPT for a long time to make it do all my Python work, because I just never liked Python. I'm not gonna lie. It's the true low code solution is Python. Just because people who don't like to code tend to code in Python, and they are able to just get a lot done without actually becoming like full-blown software engineers. They're just like researchers that are just like, oh gosh, okay, done, right? And so it's like I always looked at Python as this language I just never wanted to invest a lot in. And so I just tried to always get ChatGPT to do it all for me. By the way, I call it ChatGPT. It's just way easier than saying GPT. And so GPT way easier. And and it sounds more like Jiminy Cricket or something like that. It sounds like a fun friend.
It's fun. It's stupid sounding, right? Like the whole point is that it's just dumb sounding, and that's funny to me. I don't know. Maybe the Jim Carrey days influenced me on this one. But what I realized is that I was able to make it so far, but at the end of the day, I learned nothing about Python. I had nothing to show for my time, and I did spend a decent amount of time coaxing it, coercing it, convincing it, begging it to make the right stuff. And I just realized that all I was doing was training myself how to provide input to make the AI solve the problem.
Yeah.
I was solving a problem, just a different problem. And I realized that if I could have gone back and I could have waved a magic wand, I should have asked it how to do those step by step and then programmed it all myself and acquired that little bit of knowledge. That would have probably been like 3 hours worth of work. And then I would have been just so much faster. I would have been able to move so much quicker. And that would have probably paid out tenfold. But instead, it paid out zerofold because I relied on it to solve my problems, didn't use it as a platform of research.
Yeah. I mean, like people who, I guess, get really good with tools but lack the fundamentals, they're always kind of, they can't ever really get leverage and like scale their output. They're kind of limited by the, I guess, throughput of those tools and what those tools can do. And that's why like we encourage people to really dive deep into the fundamentals and really learn math, computer science concepts, take time to read Donald Knuth and stuff like that, if that's how you pronounce his last name. And I hope that doesn't sound too like highfalutin, heavy-handed, like you got to really put in your time. But people are in a rush. They've been told by the marketers, like, hey, learn to code in 9 weeks. get a FANG job. Pay off your student debt from your degree that didn't, help you pay off your student debt, right? And I guess I'm grateful that like there is kind of this back to basics movement, and you're out there preaching, for lack of a better word, like encouraging people to strengthen their fundamentals. And you're introspecting. You're talking about this experience that you had with, using GPT-4 to be able to basically kind of like shortcut actually having to learn and put in the hard work. And that you saw that darkness in yourself. You saw that anti-pattern like emerging. Do you think that everybody, like what proportion of people do you think will just cave to that? Like, do you think everybody has the capacity to step back and think like, gee, like I just took a bunch of shortcuts and to introspect well enough that they realized that they didn't actually write that code, that all they did was do a series of like naive prompts, and GPT-4 was smart enough to kind of like fill in the blanks?
I think people will always optimize in our society. Maybe there's exist different societies in which I'm not a cultural narcissist. I do not believe that everyone behaves like we do. So I'm speaking from a very American perspective. Maybe broader, you could broaden it out to the West perspective, but that we will always do what is most efficient, generally speaking. So if I took 100 people and I said, hey, you could A, learn all these things, solve the problem, it'll take you 1 week, or B, hey, you could prompt and, get far enough and you could be done in 2 hours, and you had a job and you had things to do and you had people to answer to, you just go, okay, well, I just want to move on. Not that you actually, you don't get the dividends, you just get the paycheck. And so I think we often trade dividends for paychecks. And I've been trying to, if you will, the renaissance of becoming a more learned man, trying to slow things down and try to adopt a different culture, which is that, you want to become the master of your craft. I love those stories of these, like that one dude from Norway who could roll steel so well that it took us all the way until we had our fantastic technologies just to be able to understand how he built these swords that were like unbreakable. It's just like, how he got that good? He probably had some freak genetic gift, but he also spent like 30 years making swords to the point where he could flick it, listen to the ring of it, and be like, this one's bad. Understand deep down. It's just such a hidden knowledge, secret knowledge level, like how to do things at just this beautiful level. And like, I want that. I want the craft. I want the craft for the sake of the craft. I don't want the craft just to simply have output, because at the end of the day, output works and it's great. And I would say that output is much more entertaining / driving for younger people. I think when I was younger, output was way more chief the concern than the craft itself. And as I've gotten older, I find myself realizing that, life is just, it has to be more than just productivity. I want to wake up every day, and even if I work on the worst things, I want to enjoy it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like what you just said, since we were talking about NES and like, speed running and things like that, your ability to speed run Battletoads in like 36 minutes. There was this guy, and you may already be familiar with this, but there was this guy who would speedrun all these games back before speedrunning was really even a thing. He'd submit his times and everything. His name was Matt Turk. And have you heard of this guy? He had like records.
I feel like I did watch the recent like big speed running thing of the origins of all the speed running with games done quick and all that. I feel like that name was mentioned, but I'm trying to like place it where it was.
It took people years to reproduce, like deliberate, like speedrunners didn't understand how he was able to get these times, but they eventually were able to like kind of reverse engineer. He just got it, and then he moved on to the next one, and he was just obsessed with the craft. He didn't even really care that much about the street cred or anything like that. So there's no street cred to be gained. I don't think he even like filmed his attempts or anything. There was just a culture of like, that seems like a really fast time, but I guess it's realistic. And then years later, people were able to like gradually beat it. But he had so many records stand for so long, and it was probably some freak combination of like natural aptitude and ability. Maybe he just had superhuman like attention to detail.
Some sort of weird thick genetic cord down his spine that just like allowed super fast, electricity to flow.
Yeah, but it's kind of the same thing. It's like I don't know if that guy even knows that people know who he is or care, but he's just some forum user from 2006 or something like that, playing Nintendo games that nobody even plays anymore back at that time. Just the romanticism, like it's very romantic, the notion that this guy's just sitting there probably, in the proverbial mom's basement, just getting really good at these games and totally underappreciated, but he appreciates himself. He appreciates that he is getting these ridiculous times, even though he's not even competing with anybody at this time because he's so far beyond the competition. He's still competing with himself. He's trying to one up himself with each attempt. And there's something really, I don't know, like for me as, a man and as somebody who takes pride in what they do, there's something very romantic about that. So
yeah, I used to do a speed run myself in Mario Kart, the original one with Yoshi on Rainbow Road. I don't remember my exact times, but I know that I could hit every single corner. I would drift across every single, it was perfect. And drifting didn't give you a boost. This is the OG. I could play the entire thing perfect every single time. And I forget the exact timings I was, but it was just awesome. And I just loved it. And I'd never fall off an edge. And it was just this idea of just doing the thing so well. And then that one time you got lucky and you got a mushroom. And on the backside of Rainbow Road, you could hit the mushroom and take the jump across the entire chasm. It was just that one run was just so much faster than all the rest of the runs. And it was just so cool.
But you had to get in all the other runs and play the random number generator game until you got in the position, and you had to get your skills into the position to where you wouldn't choke the moment you got that mushroom, and then you would actually finish the run.
And I choked many times because it was so exciting. I was like, ah,
Yeah. Well, just keeping with our general theme of chronology and just to establish the Primeagen origin story. So let's talk a little bit about high school and college and because you did ultimately go and study computer science and but when you went into was your high school guidance counselor were people yes, this man is going to be a software engineer? What did people think about you when you were in high school? What was your general vibe you were giving off?
Well, my teachers, all but a couple, very few. I think of Mr. Patrick all the time. If somehow Mr. Patrick from Billings West High ever heard this, shout out to Mr. Patrick, great guy. And if you know anyone in Billings, you tell them to tell Mr. Patrick if he's still around that he's the best. But all the rest of the teachers, I probably wasn't the best student. Okay, there's this one teacher named Mrs. Baird, and she had 200 bears in a room, and I may or may not have thrown one or two of the bears out the window. I may or may not have gotten in some decent trouble. She hand wrote me a note telling me that I will never amount to anything in my life.
She literally hand wrote you a note saying that. The malice.
She took the time. She took the time and the effort and the patience to really remind me that I am by far the worst person in the universe. And so, I was a shithead, granted. I don't know if cursing's allowed on this. I was a poop head.
Yeah, I don't censor anything. Don't worry about it.
Okay. And so I agree. I was not very nice. But, I wish it would have a more positive teacher been good for me? Maybe not. Maybe that was just what I needed. I never hold on to things negatively and use that as motivation. You hear Michael Jordan talking about that he'd intentionally pick a fight with someone else on the opposite team because he needed that drive. I don't want to win because I can beat somebody else. I want to win because I can be better than I am at this current moment. Right? Again, the ghost running, Super Mario, go-kart, all that kind of stuff. It's the perpetual drive to win. Perfectionism, maybe, is the right term for it. And so, high school, I was definitely a disaster for sure. College, it extended into that disaster, just worse. And it took me 3 tries to get through college. The third try is when I really took off. A lot of people, put it into perspective. In my third try in college, I had, for Calculus 4, differential equations, usually we just call it Calc 4 or DiffEQ, I had the highest grade on the final, and I was also the only student to finish the final, and there was over 400 students. So I think that was pretty good. For Calc 2, I finished it in 30 minutes out of a 2-hour final, and for Calc 1, it was 20 minutes, and I finished it. I had a friend come up and said, you finished it so fast that someone thought you just quit, and then I also got the highest grades out of all those. And so I was really, really good at math. But what people don't know is that before that, I failed pre-calc 3 times, and I went to the learning center 4 hours a day for Calculus 1. And it's just like, that's the part that people don't recognize, is that I didn't get good or any of these things by, it wasn't a natural born talent or anything. So going through high school and going through college, it was a huge fight against myself. I was my own personal worst enemy, for sure, for a huge amount of it. And I had 1.5 million excuses. Everyone has excuses. I mean, there's people that have worse lives than me. There's people that have better lives than me, but we all feel, pain relatively. We all have excuses for why it's unfair or uneven or, any of those things. But it's just like, until I let go of all those things and just really went after it, I was just such a disaster when it comes to all these things.
When you say let go of all those things, like, can you elaborate on that? Like what were you, like the kind of angry young man, chip on his shoulder, kind of like that kind of archetype that you see when you see like the cop dramas and stuff like that? Like, were you like, because I was absolutely,
anger's never been me.
Okay, so you weren't angry, but
it was more just like I didn't care.
Okay, so it was apathy. It was like, were you like nihilistic, or like what was going on?
I was a drug addict that wasn't a drug addict yet, right? I just wanted to feel something, and school was not it. Right, long term, the dividend play was never it. So I'd much rather have drank or chased girls or smoked pot, done something like that. Does anything to like try to feel something. Largely into porn. I saw porn for the first time when I was 4 years old, and so that was always been a huge struggle for a large portion of my life. I haven't looked at porn in 15 plus years, 18 years. I have no idea how long, but it's been a long, long time.
Yeah, and so in this. Because you didn't feel anything, like, again, I'm not like a therapist or a psychiatrist or anything like that, but I'm just trying to make sense of this, like, as like
we
a
can
fellow,
riff. I don't hold you to scientific standards. Don't worry.
Okay, cool. So, I mean, were you just kind of apathetic as far as like academics and stuff? You're just like, I kind of suck at math, whatever. Like, were you resigned to just sucking at math?
No, it's not that I was resigned sucking at math. I was just resigned to not try.
Yeah. And so what changed? What was it the snaps? Because you put in the time, right? You went to the Learning Center, which is kind of a humiliating thing. Like oh, I'm not good enough at this. I have to ask for help, right? Like what was it that, I guess, inspired? Did the school compel you to go to the Learning Center for like 4 hours a day and get a tutor? I mean, that's a lot of resources. Math tutors, like having somebody teach you one-on-one. Was it one-on-one instruction?
Yeah. One-on-one or one-on-two. Yeah, there's always there's always open seats at a math learning center. Very few people ever take advantage of it, and TAs are required. Like, people get their college paid for by volunteering or spending all their time. It's not really volunteering if you're getting paid to do it, or your college paid for. They make that trade-off. They pay their time for being able to go to college or get their masters or get their doctorates. And so there's always was seats available. So I always there was never like me waiting for somebody. And so it was just that I just had to put in the time. As far as the things that kind of like transpired to that, it was my second go round of college, and I became a late life Christian, and I kind of changed, like my whole life changed on a dime and on a single evening. Never really had any of that. Wasn't planning on having any of that. And unlike all these fancy stories where people say how their whole life changed and all that, the only thing I gained was a conscience. And all of a sudden I couldn't do things that I used to do. So if I watched porn, I felt bad about it. I never felt bad in my lifetime. All of a sudden, I feel bad about it. If I smoked pot, I felt bad about it. If I drank, I felt bad about it. I was like, what is going on with my life? And so it's just like, just everything changed. And so then it's just like me. I was the most reluctant person becoming a normal contributing citizen, I think, of all time. It's just like, just every single step of the way, I hated it. And it's just like, oh man, absolutely, just the worst, just teeth pulling the whole way.
Yeah. Can you talk about that, like that moment of like just hearing a conscious, like, was it like a voice in your head, or was it just a vibe in your gut? Like, I shouldn't be doing this.
Yeah, more vibe in the gut probably than anything else, however that happens, where I don't pretend to know any of these things, because obviously it's not like I was a well-researched person. I wasn't, this was not an intellectual exercise that led me to A or B. This was a very sharp moment that I just felt like the reality of all decisions I've ever made compounded, plus like the reality of all future decisions I will make.
If you were to travel back to that moment, do you remember the specific moment? Like, were you just sitting on the couch, like, and it just hit you, or like?
It's a personal moment. I'll keep that to me, but
that's so
it was
cool.
It was just a very intense thing.
Yeah.
And that's all I remember, is just being so compelled to do something. That's it. Like, that's why I just say, like, holy cow, is this what experiencing God is like? I have no idea, because it was vastly, like, if my realm of experience was this circle, it was somewhere way far out on the outside. So I was like, this is vastly different than all things in my entire lifetime. And so therefore I'm going to have to, it would be a fool of me not to respond. And so I responded, right? And that was what led me down the path of being changed, where I was fine doing work. It's like, all of a sudden it also unlocked one thing I could learn. I could now not look at school as a complete disaster.
Yeah, and what happened from there? I mean, it sounds like frankly, it sounds like you were a new man. Like it had a dramatic, sudden impact on your academics, on how you managed your time, on how you managed your own behavior and like impulses and things like that.
Yeah, it took a long time for me to catch up. You know, like, often I think we all experience this, where our heart will move, but our actions aren't representing how we feel. Like, I think we've all had these kind of things where, you know, like, take any person that's not in shape, but they've all of a sudden they really want to get in shape. Like, their heart has moved and they now feel bad because they know that they didn't do what they thought they should have done, right? Like, and so that's kind of like what happened in my life. And this distance took 3 years for it to close. And so it was a long time, but it was just like, I knew that I didn't like where I was.
Yeah, so like that.
So I didn't want to be addicted to porn or drugs or any of those things. Like, I wanted a life that was as meaningful and good, and I could actually, you know, I could actually one day have a wife and kids and not give them the same curse that I was given at a young age. Like, how do I give something better than what I had?
Yeah. And, you know, to fast forward a little bit, you have a wife and kids. You have been able to find success, and it doesn't sound like much of this would have materialized if you just stayed doing what you were doing. Do you ever think about like how, like, if you could, I often think like I had some pretty dire times. Like, I had a big falling out with my parents. I spent like a year sleeping in my car at the Walmart, where you can, fun fact, Walmart will generally not call the cops on you if you're sleeping in their parking lot. They have kind of like a unspoken rule that, you know, people who are between places to live can like sleep in their car there. And, you know, hospitals and other places like that are generally pretty understanding. So yeah, like I kind of went through a period like that too, where I, you know, dropped out of high school and just spent like my entire teenage time doing a lot of things that I'm not like super proud of. It's not that I'm not proud of them, but it was just like, looking back, I feel guilty that I squandered so much of that time and energy that I could have spent, you know, reading or learning. And eventually I was able to, you know, go to state school and get my degree and everything like that. But I always felt like that there were the lost years, so to speak. And I always wish that, like, I talked about Star Trek earlier. I'm going to talk about it now. There's this one episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation where they're trapped in like a Mobius, like a loop of time. And Data and Captain Riker figure out this way that they can communicate and send information back to themselves so that they can change some sort of like thing, because the ship's going to blow up if they don't do something different than what they've been doing over and over. The ship keeps blowing up.
I saw that. I saw all the episodes, but I can't remember that many of them. But I feel like I remember that one. There's another movie called Ark on Netflix that is effectively the same thing.
Okay, cool. And so anyway, they figure out this way that they can like basically use, you know, tech, as the writers referred to it, like neutrinos or something like that they could send like a few bits of information back. And all they could do was sent like something in Data's like, you know, AI powered mind. Like, he could actually perceive these and it would like flip a bit or something like that, and he would be aware of it. And they could only send like, I think he sent back like the number 3 or something like that. Right. And that's it. So again, I don't want to spoil this episode, but I often wish that I could send something back to myself when I was sleeping in my car at Walmart. Just like if I could just send back 2 letters or something so that I could have some sort of hope, because I felt really hopeless. I felt really nihilistic. I genuinely didn't think that I would live into my 20s. I just figured, like, a lot of my friends died, you know, like suicide, other things like that. And I just didn't see a future for myself. And I wish that I could send back the letters okay or something like that, just so I would be like, oh, there's hope for me, you know? Did you feel any sort of hope? And do you wish you could send hope back? Or do you think that if you sent hope back, that would corrupt you somehow and like potentially ruin the process? Like, would you trade what you went through,
I would never trade what I went through. I hold no resentment towards anyone or anything. No, I would never trade what I had. Because if I would have traded what I had, I have, again, if I could make myself feel better, I would have not probably had the same life change event. I would have artificially felt better about myself. That would not have cured anything. That would not have changed anything fundamentally within me. Like, it took a hard time to make a different person. Like there's that old phrase, right? It goes something along the lines of like, hard times make good men make easy times make bad men make hard times. Some I forget, it's an old phrase. It goes something along those lines. It's just like, I had to have that same internal small cycle where it's like, and if I didn't have the bad, I don't think I could have had the good.
Yeah. Awesome. Well,
it's like the you always see these, like, there's a lot of these stories that exist where the person that was the ultimate bad guy, whatever it was, they're doing something and they're fighting, the good guy. This happens in chess as well. You give up something that looks so high value in the moment, but you win in the end because you're able, like, the person doesn't realize that though they're making the most winning best move in the moment, like, the thing that they're losing is actually the game. And so, like, it's that greater thing where it's just like, I wouldn't want to do that because I don't know how the chess pieces would have fallen out. To make that better, to make a better analogy there, which is like, I'm glad that I had to give up the queen.
Yeah. Or like Bobby Fischer sacrificing like almost all his pieces in order to, like.
Is that the Immortal game?
Yeah, I think that's the Immortal game. I think refers to a different game, but okay,
it's like they lose every last piece except for 2 and then win the game.
Yeah,
like the greatest bamboozling of all time.
Yeah, but it's just like seeing that line and committing to it and being willing to go through all that pain for what you believe is a good outcome. Because, I mean, your judgment could be wrong, or your opponent could do something that is, like, maybe they see that, oh, he keeps sacrificing high value pieces. He's trying to bait me into something, but like, maybe they're not as greedy as you think they are. I see what you're saying. And I think sacrifice, let's talk a little bit about sacrifice, because you put a ton of time and energy into your skills over the years. You've put a ton of time and energy into optimizing different aspects of, just being a developer. And we can geek out on a lot of the different tools and techniques you use and things like that. And I would love to do that if you are interested in talking about that.
Yeah.
But
first I gotta do the philosophical side of why working hard and all these things are good. So you hear this phrase a lot, which is work smart, not hard. And so this is where I call absolute bullshit on that phrase. Because when you don't know what smart is, there's only one way to get it, which is by working hard. And so the smart way to work when you don't know what you're doing is to work hard. Because if let's just say that it's going to take you roughly 10,000 hours of good focus time to become great at programming. And after you've worked, say, X amount of hours, your focus time kind of reduces by 10, 15%, some amount that you're just not as good. You're still getting closer every hour that you're putting effort and time into. And, if someone's working, say, 80 hours a week and someone's working 40 hours a week, and you compare them in 2 years, like, I would take the bet, blindfolded and spun around in circles every single time, that the person that did 80 hours is in a significantly different position than the person that did 40 hours. Like, it doesn't matter how smart that 40-hour person worked. It's just sometimes time wins every time. Like, that was a very 60% of the time it wins every time phrase. But it was like time wins every time, right? The person that's just willing to do the most will always win. That's why you see the stories about, like, Kobe. Kobe was the first person in the gym, last person out of the gym. You're telling me that there wasn't times he didn't feel it, didn't want to do it, it was too ouchy, things were hurting, probably should have taken a break? No, it's just that laser focus to do something great. But not everybody needs to be Kobe. Not everybody wants to be Kobe, and that's okay. You first determine where you want to be, and then you set in motion the steps you need to take to get to that position. And if Kobe's the goal, be the first person in, be the last person out.
Yeah.
If Kobe's not the goal, then, adjust accordingly.
And that's something I'd also like to talk with you about, because freeCodeCamp, like, there were probably literally weeks where I was working like more than 100 hours, maybe even like 120 hours early on, trying to get this open source project off the ground and stuff. And of course, like, in my humble opinion, it's bad management to expect your charges to do that. Like I absolutely advocate for
I'm on your
work-life
team
balance.
100% with that.
But as a founder or as somebody who's trying to, like, I mean, you could be considered a founder of the Primeagen, like, persona, the stream, like everything you've built, right? Like that took probably an incredible amount of work, it sounds like. I mean, where do you kind of draw the line, like between believing that work-life balance is important and yet seeing that your own success probably would not have happened if you were trying to work-life balance your way? Or do you believe that? Do you believe that you could have gotten where you were if you didn't?
I call it the truth, like, because I don't like the term gatekeeping. I don't know if you've ever heard any of my rants about it. 99% of what people say is gatekeeping isn't gatekeeping. It's just someone being mean on the internet. But I'd say one of the most actual gatekeeping things you can ever see are these people who've achieved a lot in programming, and they achieved it via like working to death and doing these things. Tell everybody how important work-life balance is and that you shouldn't do that and don't do that. What they've done is they've sold you a bill of goods that they themselves didn't follow and they themselves didn't use to achieve what they achieved, and then tell you shouldn't do that. Like, is success only relegated for them? That's how I kind of take these type of phrases. It's like there's a good kind of thing you can say, and then there's a bad kind of thing you can say. Saying you should never do that, that's probably not the right phrase. Saying, hey, you got to know when the trade-offs are, and you got to be able to make the right decisions. And at some points in your life, it is good to do something that's probably unhealthy for a short period of time. Like, that's okay. If you're a founder and you want your company to be a success, well, there's only one choice you have to make. You just got to have more hours in. Like, that's just going to ultimately make it potentially more successful. And it's not like it's good. I don't recommend anyone doing 100 hours worth of work a week. Like, that's just not healthy. Like, it's not physically healthy, spiritually or emotionally healthy. But if I had to do it for 6 months, I would do it for 6 months. Not that I want to. It's just a kind of like a willingness to do that. As far as like work-life balance stuff goes and all that, how I think about it is that I see it all. I do see this quite frequently. People talk about how important that is, but when it comes to actual life balance, they're around their kids, they're around their wife, they're around their husband, they're around family, moms, whatever, but their brain is completely somewhere else. They're not in it. And so it's just like, that's not work-life balance.
Yeah.
You're just somewhere else. I like that. How does that count? And so it's like, if you're going to do something, you should just do it. You should just do it well. And so when I go home, I turn off my work brain. And I can just do that. And it's a skill I've been practicing. It wasn't just something that immediately, popped out of nowhere. It was something that took effort and effort and effort. And how I typically go about it is, it's the same thing when you're at work and you get distracted. You will never be able to take away distractions, but you will be able to respond to a distraction when you realize you're distracted, to respond in the positive. That is your chance. I have had different phrases throughout my life to describe it, but that's how I think about it now, which is that you can't control the distraction. You can control how you respond when you realize. And so when I'm with my kids, that time to realize I'm being distracted has just gotten smaller and smaller and smaller because I actively fight against it. The moment I realize I'm not doing something, I don't finish the thought. I don't keep on thinking about, like, oh, I should really do this, but hold on.
Yeah.
Okay, well, what about, no. Cut it off, the end, move on, back in. I really don't feel like getting up. I really don't feel like crawling on the ground. I really don't feel like carrying my kids. You know what? Shut up. You're going to do it because it means way more to them. And it really doesn't feel that bad. I'm willing to lift weights. I could be willing to crawl on the ground.
Yeah.
It's just like that willingness, that desire to, like, not listen to the thing that says don't do it, but listen to the thing that says this is going to be, like, I'm in the moment. So when I'm programming, gosh darn it, I want to be programming. And when I'm with my kids, gosh darn it, I want to be with my kids.
Yeah. Do you find that they ever like bleed into one another? Like I mean, do you work at home or do you have like some sort of
I have a
office
horse barn
space
that I converted. Yeah, I have a horse barn that I converted.
So you can walk across your property to your studio, essentially.
Yeah. But I do have a physical barrier, which I think does help. A physical barrier does help. If you have some form of routine, I think routine helps a lot because then you can build that muscle via routine to, like, stop doing something. That's just more practical tips. So if you get off work at the same time every day. Sometimes you can't control when you start work, but you can always control when you stop, and you just force yourself to stop. And it's just like, I always say the same thing with sleep. If you want to get a good sleep schedule, you don't control when you go to bed, you control when you wake up. Your body will eventually say uncle and will start. we'll fall in line. But there will be a period where it's very uncomfortable, but you kind of forced yourself into a new schedule. 5 o'clock is when I'm going to wake up. Like, sorry me who stayed up till midnight last night. Man, this sucks. But I'm going to drink 14 cups of coffee and just call it a day until I can like make myself fall into line. Yeah. And so that's kind of like the ideas that I generally float around with, is just creating strong routines. And so I get off at 4. I try to get up at 5. And I go straight to work. I like make coffee and go straight to work. I don't do a morning routine. There's no red light therapy, cold plunge, hot plunge, all that kind of stuff. Just bam, straight to work, right? And just go right into it, because that's the only way I can get in the hours I want.
Yeah. The best thing I ever did for my sleep schedule was have kids, because my kids wake up at 7 o'clock no matter what. Sometimes 6:30.
Yeah. And eventually you will fall into line. Like you most certainly experienced this. You probably were a night owl. I'm a natural night owl. I'd rather program at 1 in the morning than 1 in the afternoon. And it's just like a natural part of me. But it's just like, I just fought it and changed it because life circumstances forced it. And so then I just leaned in.
Yeah. So let's talk a little. I mean, we could go through the whole like your entire developer origin story, but like frankly, I'm more interested in just gleaning like insight and sharing them with you, because you're prolific, man. Like I'm sure you're aware of this, but like you stream a ton. You have like 3 YouTube channels where you're publishing stuff. You are constantly posting on Twitter and probably other social media as well. And you're building like substantial. You're like not just on the stream like let's chat. You're actually building things and somehow managing the flow of conversation and responding intelligently while you're also holding a bunch of stuff in your head when you're coding. Like I don't want this to devolve into like productivity bullet points or anything like that, but like I do want to learn a little bit more about your process if that's cool. And maybe you could walk me through like a typical day. Like, do you know when you're sitting down what you're going to do that day? Like you get your coffee, it's 5 a.m. You're walking, bro, you live in like a pretty cold part of North America, right? Like
I live in South Dakota, so it's colder. It also is hot during the summer.
Definitely colder than here in Texas.
Very variable.
Yeah. So you're like trudging through
but I mean, Texas
the
is
snow
cold
potentially
in itself,
to this horse barn, and you're sitting down. I hope you have insulation in there. Do you have insulation? Do you have a space heater? How do you stay warm?
I have a mini split that I put up there. That was like the most expensive part of this. It was framing and the mini split that were the 2 big ones. And so this is paint.
That's like a literal painted wall. You're not using like the flimsy green screen. It's never going to be a wrinkle.
I got a green room. Unironically green room.
Yeah. So like, let's talk about like, okay, 5 a.m. Like put us in the shoes of the Primeagen as he's sipping his coffee. Oh, wow. Yeah. So it's a real green room. And then of course there's the camera, the ring light.
There's a bunch of foam all over the place. Like if I go on that side,
the next season of The Mandalorian could be filmed right there in your horse barn.
It could be.
Yeah.
This is literally a horse barn and 2 stalls.
Very cool. So like, what is your day like? Like you got the coffee, you're walking out there, you're sitting down. What happens? Walk us through it.
I generally come in with a very, very, I know that I'm going to program. I know I'm going to do something, and that's typically how I start. Like I have a project that I've been building, and that project is fairly complex or fairly technical. And I know that if I just sit down, I'll just, it will come back to me, all the things I need to learn. So sometimes, as I BS or talk with people, I'm in my back brain going, okay, what was the last thing I did? Okay, I remember all this stuff. All right, now I know what I need to do. Like I have 5 things that I know I need to do to put what I'm working on the shelf. I just don't remember right now what the 5 things are. I'm sure I could like derive them if I just rewalk the path, but we'll start later and I'll start figuring out things and get it done.
Well, tell us a little bit about your frame of like what you experience as somebody who has 1,000 people watching you on Twitch and like rapidly typing, comments, and what it's like to watch that all that stream by, knowing that you got to keep the show going. This is live. Yeah. Like what does it feel like?
It's shockingly, it doesn't feel much different than when I had 30 people watching me or 20 people. When I started programming on Twitch, a big stream was like 30 people. That was like amazing. And so it's like, it's changed quite a bit, but it's still the same thing. I'm still just trying to build something that's ridiculous. I don't have I don't have just some, a lot of people, you'll see a lot of people with these things where they have all these tips and like oh man, such good marketing ideas, and you got to send it at this time of the day to do these kind of things, and you want to talk about this at this time, and I have literally no plans.
So you're just relying on your ability to perform in the moment, essentially. Like, it's a performance. Essentially, there's not like a whole lot of systems in place to like help you. Like perhaps like a less interesting streamer would just have gimmicks or something like, let's go to dumb pet tricks or something like that, or whatever it would be, like different segments or things. Do you do anything like that, or is it like? And I'll be completely candid, I've never sat down and like actually watched one of your streams. I just watch YouTube, and I watch it at like double speed, and I usually watch it while I'm doing something else. Like, not to denigrate your art or anything like that, but what would a typical flow be like for somebody who's never watched you stream before?
It just depends on the day. So I either do heavy programming days, or we do like article style days and all that. And so these are the heavy, like today was a heavy programming day. So for 5-6 hours, we just wrote Go code, wrote all of Huffman encoding for stuff. And I could do, various value size and all that for Huffman encoding. And then we ended up beating gzip for this kind of real-time rendering engine that I'm doing right now. And so that was fantastic. I was very, very happy about that, but that was today. And so that was the plan. I knew I wanted to get far into the Huffman thing. Didn't think I was going to put a bow on it, but hey, we put a bow on it. And so now it's done. Now I get to move on to the next thing. Quad trees. I have a theory that if you break up the screen into various regions, those regions change less than if you try to do the entire screen at once for encoding. And so obviously all this stuff has been done before, but I'm just doing it myself. I'm doing it all myself, and I'm going to make a little fun engine for game stuff. And so that's the next thing I'll do.
And like, pardon me if I'm asking kind of really layman question, but essentially just more efficient compression is what you're after.
Yeah. So it's the idea is that I'm rendering it in the browser using DOM elements. And so everything is rendered on the server and all finished, and just on the just in the browser do you see the result, and that's it. And so it's kind of like WebRTC or something like that, but it's just with ASCII. So it's all ASCII games. That's part of the fun. I wanted to make them all ASCII, and so it's all browser-based ASCII stuff. So it's just like minimizing how much data you send down.
Yeah, that's really cool. So like Dwarf Fortress type games, or I mean,
sure,
would that be a representative of the type of games you're developing? Are you a Dwarf?
Well, the first
Fortress
one I'm doing
plan?
is I'm encoding Doom.
Okay.
And we're going to play Doom, so that way everyone in chat can play Doom at the same time. So instead of having Doom on the most bizarre device, I want to have 2,000 people play Doom at the same time.
Yeah, that's a novel approach. Instead of having it running on a pregnancy test, you're having a whole bunch of people running it on, Twitch. Is like Twitch Plays Pokemon, I think, was like an experiment.
Yeah, that
like
was the first one. The problem is latency. Latency sucks, right?
Yeah, and
so because
Pokemon's
if you don't know,
like
the average
kind of Doom is very instantaneous. Like, you have to be quickly moving around if you're not going to get slaughtered by these demons, right?
Precisely. Hence the reason why you have to have, why I'm building all this real-time stuff is that I want someone to be able to open up a web browser, and I'll be shooting up from my computer up into some FlyIO nodes or something like that, and then it will display what's on my computer within like 500 milliseconds. There's some like latency that you could have. That's fine. It's just that anything beyond that, it becomes untenable. So if they press in chat and chat takes 200 milliseconds to get to my computer, plus, or 300 or 400 or 500 milliseconds, plus for them to see what they're seeing is, 400 milliseconds behind, that still actually largely works because Doom is such a simple game. You don't need to be precise. You just need to like shoot in the demon's general direction and you hit it. So, there's a lot of forgiveness in the game. This isn't Fortnite. This is...
Yeah, so a lot of people are going to be using the double-barreled shotgun if they're going to have any success, I would imagine.
Yeah, you can select guns by just selecting a different gun.
Yeah, and Twitch itself has like a good amount of latency, like several seconds. So like if they're looking at the actual Twitch stream, then what has happened in the game has already moved on like a couple seconds before their input actually
quite
reaches
a bit.
You. So how do you address
quite
that?
a bit.
Is there a way to address that?
That's why I'm doing the whole real-time stuff. Is that they're going to open up a website.
Okay. So you're not going to rely on
what's on my
Twitch.
computer within a few hundred milliseconds. And if I really felt like I could shave off another 150 or whatever it is, my guess is that a lot of my ping up to these servers is like 40, 50 milliseconds. So it's not like terrible. And so for me to send up this data and then to just have it routed back down to somebody, it'll be like 90 milliseconds for them. It's like not a huge, it's nothing that's deal breaking.
Yeah.
The deal breaker will be all Twitch chat latency, which will be like on the order of 500 milliseconds.
Have you talked to Twitch? Is there anything you can do to like improve that latency?
I could make them so they could play via just the website, but I don't want to.
Yeah.
It's more fun to make them go on Twitch and all vote with W's and A's and S's and D's to say exactly what they want.
So it's a consensus like most people said A here, so we're going to move to the left, basically. Like
yeah, I'll be taking like every 100 milliseconds, every 75 milliseconds. That consensus will then play that key for the next 75 milliseconds or whatever it is. Except if it's a fire, it just plays it once. And so it's just like you kind of have to make it play these different things. And can you do like WF so that it both moves forward and fires at the same time? So I got to figure out like some of those things.
Yeah. I guess this is an interesting kind of metacognition thing, but there are going to be a certain number of people in your audience who are going to be wanting to step toward the IMP's fireball as opposed to away from it. And what if the number of trolls or griefers like outnumbers the people who just want to play an honest game of Doom?
Then we lose. Like that's the end. The thing is most generally speaking, most people want to win. So that's the nice part. So that's why the second game I want to develop is going to be a tower defense where it's chat versus me, and you can troll. Just the thing is you got to pay bits, and if you troll, you hurt yourself. You let me win. So then there's like this whole fundamental thing. So the troll toll is only to hurt yourself. And so the whole idea is that you get to, if you're going to troll, you make your own team lose, and which makes me win. And you, the viewer, there's a fundamental, like, you don't want the streamer to win.
Yeah.
Like there's definitely like that just exists. They want to see you not be successful. So it like puts them in this really painful position where they have to try to make the right decision. And
you benefit monetarily from the bits, I guess.
Yeah, if they make the worst decision, if they troll toll, then,
yeah,
it's going to cost them $5.
So you have been successful on two mediums. So this is like not like their influencers can never break off of TikTok, right? And like never really have success out of their first platform, but you have managed to kind of like transplant yourself over onto YouTube through like these VODs, video on demand, and other things like that. You seem to have like a really good editor who identifies like interesting clips and like chops them out and puts them up as standalone videos. Like, so you're kind of at the forefront of the difference in culture between Twitch, which is primarily gamer driven, and like YouTube, which I mean is like everybody. It's the biggest website on the internet, basically.
Yeah.
And like, so you're almost kind of like in a position where you could be like a cultural anthropologist between those two worlds. Like, what are some of the things you've observed that are different on Twitch and the nature of that medium versus YouTube, which is, like real time with chat, versus YouTube with its extremely sluggish comment system. Not sluggish, but like, people watch the video, then they go to the comments.
It's not for communication.
Yeah.
It's not for synchronous communication. It's for, I always feel bad using the term async ever since Annie made a big deal about async, and now I'm just like, oh man, it's so true. Async means to asynchronous communication is to take two communications and synchronize them. So you've been using the word all wrong, but Twitch is, you go to Twitch for connection. So that means that you're going there because you want to see someone. You have something in mind. Typically is what Twitch is about. And YouTube, you typically go to YouTube to watch something you want to watch. And so they're just vastly different crowds. People that, really like YouTube, they'll just pretty much largely stay on YouTube. People that really like Twitch will largely just stay on Twitch.
Okay, so you've cultivated two like very different audiences.
Generally, yeah.
Have you noticed? So like a lot of people probably have a parasocial relationship with you, where like you don't necessarily know a whole lot about them, but they know quite a bit about you, especially if they spent a substantial amount of time watching your videos. It could be said that before this call, I had a parasocial relationship with you, and you may not have had any sort of relationship with me. I don't know if you ever listened to the FreeCodeCamp podcast before. So
no, I just knew your picture. That's it.
Well, what like how do you interact with people on Twitch, and do you even go over to YouTube and like interact in the comment section on YouTube?
Generally, I stay away from the comment section just because there's a lot of really nice comments, but then there's also a lot of like not so nice comments, and so that's just a reality to all of it, and so I'm okay with that, and so I don't like to, I just don't. It's just not there. So I like all the live stuff, and so it's fun like talking to them because you can have like a more real conversation, whereas if you're trying to respond to Twitch comments or a YouTube comment section, it's just like you say something, they may say something back, but you'll probably never get the notification. You have absolutely no idea what happens. So it's like there's no real back and forth or real communication with it all, and so it's just different.
Yeah, it's kind of like letter to the editor.
If I go on YouTube, I have something like it's like 20,000 notifications.
Yeah, that's a lot. And those are mostly bells. Like people commenting on things that unfortunately are comments that you probably won't have the time to read and like thoughtfully respond to.
Yeah.
How do you do it on Twitch? Moving back to Twitch, because I did live stream coding on Twitch for maybe 6 or 8 months or something like that. And I was right about like where you were talking, like I might have 30 people tuning in, like, oh, let's watch Quincy, build the early versions of freeCodeCamp or implement this feature or whatever.
How many years ago was that?
9 years ago.
Okay.
So, and there wasn't like a live coding section. I don't even know if there is a live coding section on Twitch. Like people have been asking for like live coding, like sections on Twitch for a long time. Is there one now?
Yeah, software and game development.
Okay,
yeah.
Great. I'm glad they added that because that was like really frustrating that like there was like no discovery on Twitch.
Discovery, you never go to Twitch for discovery. That's generally a good rule of thumb.
Yeah, and it felt weird for me to be using like Twitter and like these other places that had worked really hard to like try to steer attention to Twitch was a platform that like at the time 9 years ago not very many people got it. I still don't really get it, frankly. Like I don't use Twitch just because like I use podcasts at double speed while I'm like walking my kids and stuff like that. Like everything, I don't know. Maybe that sounds like toxic productivity type stuff, but like the idea of me sitting there and just watching somebody in real time do stuff on Twitch. So like I just want to be forthcoming. I don't get Twitch, but you seem to get Twitch. You
maybe missed doing it a little bit. Like if you were programming a whole bunch and you're just hanging out, a lot of times people just use it as co-working space.
Okay.
I'm over here building something. You're over there building something. You're remote working. You don't have any people that you work with. Every now and then you start chatting, and maybe I chat back with you, and it's just like, oh, that's kind of like a fun experience.
Is that how you started with it?
I mean, I think that's just generally how people view it. This is just like something that they're a part of it. I think it's more of that kind of like, so it's just more of a social interaction type thing.
Yeah. Well, are there any big like changes or any big things that you're really excited about on either the Twitch or the YouTube front? Like I know that you've got now your third channel. And I guess one question I have is like, why all the channels? Like one's like news and reaction, like article reaction. I technically
have four channels.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, I have my edited thought through video channel, which we're editing a video right now. Then I did a keyboard review on the Glove 80. Then I have like kind of like my article read hot takes channel. And then I have me just long form programming channel. And then I have just like clips and shorts and just things that I said and did on stream channel.
Okay. Yeah.
Reason being is it should be pretty obvious, but maybe it isn't. Most people that watch you don't subscribe. The people that do subscribe, they come and they go. And so if you don't have a voice on your channel, you will attract many different groups. And then as your videos go out, you'll have these many different groups to your channel, and they'll go, oh, I don't watch that. And so you just have these like hard no's. And so Google doesn't really know how to promote that. And so they just kind of shut it down. And so it's just like, okay, here's my people that want to watch curated engineering videos. Here is a curated engineering video. Oh, people that just want to hear me riff off of an article or something like that, or a tweet or something like that. Here's this group that just is like engineering adjacent. They just want to hear about programming in broad terms. Here's the hardcore coding one. Because if I just took an hour coding video and threw it on any of the other channels, it would just do horrible, because that's just not the expectation people have.
Yeah.
And so that's the idea, is that you create your own verticals. And it just makes more sense, because people they don't want to see all the same content.
You have a pretty big audience of people that take your opinion seriously, and it carries a lot of weight, especially as far as like, programming practices or things that you think are, more effective than other things. Just basically like trade-offs where people's opinion could fall on one side or the other, but you have a strong opinion in a lot of these cases. But you've said, I'm just a man giving my opinion on the internet. Like, how do you reconcile like just being a man giving your opinion with the responsibility of like essentially training a lot of the maybe mid-career devs that tune in to your Twitch stream and watch your YouTube videos? Like how do you carry that responsibility?
As far as carry the responsibility, I just don't think about it. But I mean, I know that sounds kind of weird, but I mean, generally speaking, is that I really am. I am just some guy on the internet, and I just give my opinion, and that's it. I don't try to be more than that. I don't try to be less than that. I think people often just take everything so dang seriously. So I just do the opposite. I think that's why I've been so successful, is that if you look at the older kind of the longer stayed Twitter tech celebrities, they're all so serious, and as in the last like 2 years, I feel like I single-handedly have destroyed a lot of the online tech Twitter, like what it was. I feel very proud of that, but it was so serious all the time. It was just like so highbrow. And the thing is that most people just aren't highbrow. Most people are just normal people that don't care, and they just would rather laugh a little. And if there's a little something to discuss about tech, then we'll talk about tech, and then we'll make some stupid tweet. Like today, just all I did was make a tweet where it's just if new promise, instead of reject or resolve reject, it was respect disrespect. It's just like there's nothing to that. And someone said it. The best part is someone even said it in the chat, and so I was just like MIT, grabbed it and tweeted it. Or turned it into like a code picture and then tweeted it. And it's like, that just does fantastic because it doesn't mean anything. It's just a dumb observation that we're all familiar with. And that's it. And that's just fun. Yeah. And so I feel like the general discourse is still struggling between these two halves, but it's definitely like just caving to one side, which is just, it's not like maybe it doesn't have to be that important at all times. Maybe not everything has to be the most academic. Maybe it can just be dumb for the sake of being dumb, and we can just have fun about it. Yeah. And that's okay.
It's only male modeling.
It's just male models all the way down. And so it's funny. I don't know. I've enjoyed it. I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah. So another thing that I think is really interesting about you is like you jump from one project to another, but you do actually finish the products usually. And you say, you've said that you love the process of creation for creation's sake. But as creation turns into maintenance, it starts to feel like work. Since most projects eventually become more about maintenance than creation, if you're working with a large legacy code base or something like that, you're probably spending, I don't know, maybe you could argue on this point, but you're probably spending about as much time just maintaining that and making sure that that continues to work as you are actually building out new functionality and stuff. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah. Harpoon is like my big thorn in my side. It's my most popular plugin. I absolutely love it, and it works for me, but people keep using it in stupid ways, and they want me to fix it. And so I'm just like, I don't know, quit doing it that way. But I also realize that there's some bugs and some things that people want fixed or some extensions, and so it's like I need to do some stuff. I really do need to spend another 2 weeks. Or I honestly probably need to spend just 10 more hours kind of just wrapping up stuff with Harpoon, and then I can release version 2 on 6/9.
Yeah. So how do you know when it's time to like just let a project rot or like completely deprecate it and move on with your life?
It's just when I don't care anymore. That's it. I build things for the sake of building them, and if there's something that I really like, I build it to the point where I like it and use it all the time. What
makes you care about it? Is it like knowing a whole lot of people are depending on it? Because there's a lot of open source projects that like, everybody's depending on. Like, I think like Heartbleed and the one guy in his, server closet, like trying to keep basically the internet afloat. Pretty thankless job, but like that has to be maintained, right? That's mission critical infrastructure. Is there anything you've built that you feel is like, even though you don't like working on it, you feel compelled to work on it just because so many people are depending on it?
Oh yeah, Harpoon would be the only one, and so that's the one that I will try to make something better with it, but I like it the way it is, and I don't want to add new features, and so it's like me just saying no is the predominant way I maintain it, but every now and then I begrudgingly add something.
Yeah. Yeah. And you said that programming is such a key part of your life, and that it's always been such a part of your life that you really can't even imagine doing anything other than programming. Let's say hypothetically that you're like a Kevin Mitnick type character, RIP, and the FBI is literally forbade you from using computers for like 10 years or something. Like you cannot get within 10 feet of a computer or you're going directly to jail. Like if you were in a situation like that where you literally could not program, what would you do? Like where would you channel your time?
Property.
What do you mean by property?
Real estate adventures.
Let's talk about that for a second. Because you used to live in San Francisco, Bay Area, where I used to live before I moved back to Texas. And you moved back to
South
Dakota.
South Dakota.
Yeah. And like, obviously there's like, you can buy a lot more in South Dakota, and you can buy a lot more in Texas than you can in San Francisco. Have you ever thought about taking like your ridiculously high Netflix, like, I don't know if Netflix like adjusts your income at all if you like work remotely or if you move to a different place?
Yeah, they adjusted my income for sure.
Okay.
I don't work there anymore. I worked there for 10.5 years and recently quit. About a month and a half ago.
Yeah. So, but up until that point, like, what were you thinking about doing with those funds? Like, where does the extra money go? Is it just going towards supporting a family of 6?
We did a very big investment into the land that we bought. We bought a strategic place as opposed to a place to live, just because we knew that a lot of building was going this direction. The school was bidding on land near us, all that kind of stuff. And so we bought a plot of land as an investment, to try to hold for 5 years. And it's fairly expensive. So that's where most of our funds honestly go. So that's one thing. The next thing is that after that, we just kind of we've just focused on, my wife really likes running Airbnbs. And so we got a couple Airbnbs, and she just loves doing that, and she likes remodeling and all that. And so, or she does. Let me rephrase that. She hates remodeling, but she knows she needs to do it to make the place look really nice and be the way she wants it to be. And so that's where like a lot of her effort and time gets spent. And so I know if I couldn't do this, I would just pivot into that. I just learn all the things you need to learn to be really great at that, because it's like all these activities aren't hard. Again, it's just time, right? Like just like programming. Programming is objectively hard, but it's also just a time orienting. And so if I were to do some of these things, like I would never be a great woodworker. I probably am starting way too late in my life. But could I hang sheetrock? Yeah, I could hang sheetrock. And, learn to paint, learn to refinish floors, do everything, and just get really good at that and just put my time completely into that.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned woodworking, because there's like this meme or something that like programmers, like all the programmers today are the people that would be woodworkers like 100 years ago, 200 years ago. And that, like, do you see parallels between doing things with your hands, like in a wood shop or even metal shop, like, and, building software?
Yeah, you could also probably swap us out with like potentially painters and all that. But obviously back then things were so much different. And so like here's a good example did you know that college, the original idea of a Bachelor of Arts was to prepare someone's life for leisure. So yeah. It was the act of endowing someone who's already rich with the ability to know how to read and follow out the poets and all that. So I would definitely probably not be in that category. Just if my life were simpler, I would probably not be on that side. And so when people are doing these, I probably wouldn't be on the art side. Would be a fair take. I wouldn't be writing poetry / doing art. But I think that it's just the creation part. It's just that you want to be able to build things. And most of the things you build are probably just very practical for your life in the moment. Just, so I'd probably fall on that side, maybe. I'd hope. Yeah. The reality is probably if I lived 200 years ago, I'd probably be on a farm. Or die in war. It would have probably been pretty horrible. But, luckily I don't have to, be in that time.
Yeah. Unfortunately, most people probably would have died, like, long before their time, before they could realize their creative pursuits, just because it's the way things were. Yeah. It was, and people forget that. Yeah, and people also, forget that fact about higher education, that it wasn't designed to train, soldiers returning from World War II to be able to enter industry. And it was designed to help rich kids be able to have peacock brains and show off to mates and stuff like that, basically. Yeah. And to be able to fit in at dinner parties and, oh, look at Junior, he's so erudite, stuff like that. And it was literally 1%, like in the most educated place in the world, London. the 1900s, right? College really did not pick up steam as something that people did until post World War II era, when the government started funding through the GI Bill and stuff like that. But anyway, I digress. But it is really interesting that you could actually kind of consider programming more of a craftsmanship than you can consider it like a high art or whatever, right? I don't know. Where do you fall on that spectrum? Like
probably
a craftsman or an artisan?
It probably depends on the area, right? Like if you're doing like the really high academic thought things, machine learning, I think once you get into, like, I don't know if you've ever hand rolled your own MLP or RBF or any of those things. It's a lot of effort, and now once you start getting into the research area, then I think you fall into this really intense, like it's much more of an artisan, become a master at math, and then apply the math to these specific categories and all that kind of stuff. That's a different vibe than being able to build stuff.
Yeah.
Being able to build stuff quick. Like I can build most things, and most things that I build, like I've been building this project now for, about a month and a half, and I've probably put a good 100 plus hours, 200 hours into it. And I've just been building only the encoding side of things, how to make a bunch of bytes and make them smaller. And I've built almost everything out, and now I'm going to combine them all, like right now. And, the interfaces largely just all fell together almost just perfectly, despite making many mid programming shifts. It's just because I've just done it for so long that I have a bunch of just like general ideas of how to program for the long term. And this is kind of where that craftsmanship comes in, where I can just kind of, I will fall within the 80 to 90%. Now, it won't be, I won't hit 100, but most of the time, but I'll hit a good 80, 90% pretty regularly. And so that's like, it's fun, it's that craftsmanship that's building quality stuff.
Yeah. I mean, how much do you feel like you're just like falling back on your instincts that are honed over the years at the keyboard when you're doing like a lot of, like, does stuff disappear and you're just like doing it, or are you frequently pulling back to really think? Are you going to like the whiteboard? And
I rarely really think. It's just like, I just know what I want, and I feel like I can see the path, and I don't really think about the path. It's kind of like, it's like when you go hiking, you don't think about every last turn. You kind of think like, I want to get up to this point, and I know there's that one part with the field with the flowers. There's this other part with the rocks, then there's that one part with just a bunch of really tall pine trees, right? Like you just have like these places in your head that you're going to go through, and then the rest is just kind of, just details.
Awesome.
So it feels like walking. And by the way, that walk I just described was the easy way on the M in Bozeman, Montana. So if you've ever done the hike in Bozeman, Montana to the M, it starts off with like a bunch of rocks, kind of deeper bush area, and then you go out into the field of flowers, and then you turn into these really tall pine trees. And so it's like, each spot's a little different. I don't know how many turns or twists there are in between each, but that's generally what happens.
Yeah, but you just kind of manually or like instinctively navigate things, and it just happens, right? Before you know it, you're toward the end of the trail. Okay, so likening building software and like integrating all these bits of software that you've written almost to just walking a trail, because you've done that so many times, you kind of just instinctively know how to put one foot in front of the other.
Yeah, like I know what I want. So if you watch one of my streams, like today, I've never ever once in my life done Huffman encoding ever. I've just never built a Huffman encode anything. And so last week I watched a 5-minute YouTube video on it, and it's like, okay, this is how you write a Huffman tree. I was like, okay, I see how that works. And so from there, I wrote the Huffman tree generator. I wrote how I'm going to binary serialize that into a protocol, so that I could have it on the other side, how to take that protocol and efficiently walk it, and then also how do you encode and decode. Encoding and decoding is really difficult, because you got to walk from the most significant bit to the least significant bit and putting in these bits one at a time and all that. And so there's like a lot to it that just wasn't a part of the video. I just knew that I would do that. Like, that's it. It's just because I've seen it so many times that I've never done something before, and I even first tried one of it, like genuinely first try, just programmed for 45 minutes straight, hundreds of lines, put it in, pressed play, and it just worked all the way through, unit test pass and everything.
Wow. So it was like movie coding.
Yeah, movie coding. Yeah. It's still not movie coding in the sense that the next one took me 4 runs. We do this thing where I get 3 runs, and if I cannot make it past on the 3rd run, then I lose or I win. So we have bets, and people place channel points on whether I'm going to win or lose on these things. And so today on the encoding side, it took me just 1 try, so 1 out of 3 to just get it done. On the decoding side, it took 4 out of 3. So I had to go into a second round best out of 3 to get it. So I first tried the second try.
Let's
That's
talk
because I
about
bit shifted the wrong direction. Like, that's it. I bit shifted the thing over as opposed to bringing it back down.
so like a very common error that programmers probably
Just
make
such
all
a
the
stupid
time.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Just so
it sounds like because you've put in the reps at the keyboard and because you have this massive kind of corpus of knowledge and learned experience from spending so much time coding that you have this kind of this scaffolding that you just kind of throw new ideas on, right? Like you watch this 5-minute YouTube video and you kind of like maybe almost subconsciously saw the patterns and made these associations and you just internalize it.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
That's something an experienced programmer can do. And that maybe that's why like sometimes it seems like if you're a new developer and you're trying to like solve like a Project Euler problem or something like that, and you're just, oh my goodness, and you spend like 6 hours doing it. And then you could just like, somebody like you could probably sit down and do that in like 2 or 3 minutes, maybe do like a little code golf thing with it. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's why, experienced developers are so in demand. And we could kind of maybe talk about the job market because I do want to talk about AI.
We're coming up on 2 hours, so we may want to figure out which one, because I might get long-winded and talk about 40 minutes on one, and then we're just like so far over time that
it's cool.
your kids are gonna be like, Dad, and then you're gonna be like,
I'm taking my
go.
kids to CC's Pizza.
Yeah.
They love.
That means you got at some point you got to feed them. So let's pick one. You can choose.
Okay, so let's talk about AI. And
let's go. That's the one I wanted.
I mean, I do kind of want to talk about like some of the misconceptions about how it's going to impact the labor market. Let's just start with AI though. Okay, so you published a video like maybe 6 or 8 months ago, a year ago, like where you're like, I tried Copilot for like 6 months, and then I just ripped it out, and I didn't want to use it anymore. Do you remember that video?
That was about a month and a half ago that I talked about that. Yeah, it was just recently. I'm only about a month and a half into not using Copilot.
Okay, but I could have sworn I saw a video like a long time ago where you talked about...
I've started using Copilot. I started using it in the beta phase, like way before everybody. Nat Friedman, the CEO of GitHub at that point, sent me how to use it and gave me the credentials and access to a private GitHub library to be able to use it in Vim.
Okay, so you use it. I'm going to step back. I just want to hear your thoughts on Copilot, having been like one of the early beta users, having used it a lot, having stepped back from it, everything that's transpired since this tool kind of fell into your lap.
So here's my general take on Copilot. I think Copilot is great. I think that it's a very fancy autocomplete, but that's all it is. If you don't I was starting to get my master's in AI, so I have a general idea of how MLPs, what their like purpose is, and I have some understanding. There's no reasoning that goes on. And I know everyone will say, this or that, and it's AGI and all these kind of things. No, it's really good at predicting the next set of tokens that should come out. You give it some input, it gives you some output. It's really great at predictive stuff. It's really great at extrapolating. And it can just do some things that are just so amazing, right? You give it a picture of a pop can, it's like pop can. Right? It just knows. It doesn't, you look at this and you see green. You see green all the way through, but a computer like right here, that's like white. Like if you were to look at a picture of this, it would dramatically change color because it's not green at that point. And so, but our brain just maps all these things on and makes it so easy, and we just don't realize how complex these actions actually are. And so it's when I stopped using Copilot, what I realized is that it was just during the time right after I've been learning Go for the first time, like in a serious sense. I was learning Go for about 2 months. And when I turned off Copilot, I realized I didn't know Go. I didn't. I bamboozled myself into thinking I knew Go. I didn't know Go. And what I knew is how to use Copilot to write Go. And I realized, I'm not good at this. I thought I was a lot better, but I'm really not that good. And so I quit using it. And I realized all these weird habits. I would just stop typing. And one of the videos I watched not too long ago talked about the Copilot pause. Yeah, it's real. I would just pause. I would just stop. For whatever reason, that's that. Waiting for Copilot to tell me what to do. And it's just I realized that I was just largely inhibiting myself. And I did not like that one bit. I did not like the fact that I was kind of, it's not that I thought I was going to become redundant or thinking the robots are going to take over. I was just simply not, I effectively, it's almost like I just filled my coding abilities with water and turned the temperature way down. I just froze them in time. And so it's just like from when I picked up Go for the first time, which generally you're like okay at Go. You can just go if you have any programming experience. You just know it by nature. And so it's like I just froze it, and I just kept knowing that same amount of Go despite getting faster. I was just getting fast with AI. And so once that turned off, it was just like I had a reality call, and I was like, wow, okay, so I see what it actually does, and I don't like that. I want to change this. I want to be better at it. So I turned it off, and for the last month I've turned it off, and I feel like despite having to type more, and I do miss some of the autocompletes quite a bit, I am happy I still have it off, even though I would definitely say I have to type more, for sure. And there's times where I'm like, oh gosh, this would be such a good Copilot moment. Like right here, Copilot would just know exactly what I want. It's just like, it's so obvious what I want. And so it's just like, that part's painful. But the rest is just like, so, like the trade-off is just, I'm not willing to go back right now.
So, like, that's what it is for you? Like, all the hype and everything, and it's really just something that saves you a few keystrokes? You already know what you wanted to type. It's just like, okay, did it auto-complete it correctly so I don't have to type an extra 60 characters here?
Effectively, yeah. Like, you can see it, too. If you start using Copilot, like, write something that will read 1 byte out of a buffer, and then name the next method 16-bit reader, and then watch it go. Like, that's all it's doing, is it's just trying to extrapolate what you're already doing into the next thing. And it's just like, we just got done building this thing that looked like this shape. Here's the next thing that's probably the shape you're looking for, and bada bing, bada boom. It's just going to work. And you're going to be like, wow, that was pretty convenient. I liked that a whole bunch. And it's just like, I found like, I'm not going to say I was addicted to it, but I was most certainly like, I was dependent. There was a dependency for sure on it. And I was just so dang blown away by how much that thing kind of made my learning process atrophy. Like, I couldn't write a for loop in Lua. So I was doing a lot of Lua as well. I could not write a for loop during that time. I realized I did not know the syntax.
Yeah.
Because it always auto-completed it for me. And it's like, do you need to know the syntax? I mean, define the word need. That's the problem. And so it's like that for me. It's just like that's my big takeaway with Copilot is that I believe it's a Faustian bargain as of right now. For those that don't know, Dr. Faust, you get what you want in the moment, and ultimately it's the devil that takes everything away in the end, right? You trade something good for ultimately something evil. That's my personal. I know. Some people, they strongly disagree with this. And they talk about, oh man, it's making it so that it's making programming more approachable. More people can start programming. It is better in general for everybody. I hear all those arguments. I'm not even arguing against those arguments. What I'm saying is that the people that are feeling more productive, they're not actually being more productive. They're not actually learning anything. And there's something pretty serious about that long term. There's something very serious about you not actually learning some pretty important skills. Because I don't know what the consequence is. I could just see in myself the atrophy that happened, or the inability. Like I saw in myself, atrophy is probably not the right term. I saw in myself the inability to become good at something that I was doing full time, and so know it at like a more personal level. And so I was like, holy cow, that's a red flag for me. I don't know what the consequences are, but that's a red flag.
Yeah, and for you, it seems like being good at something is like the whole name of the game. Like the whole reason you're playing is to get better. So that, like, it seems like an incredibly counterproductive thing to basically give yourself a tool that'll help you get your work done faster, but your work is always you're like plateauing yourself essentially.
Yeah. And I mean, that's the big worry is like, is it good for anybody? Like, yeah, maybe I like the craft, you don't like the craft, but then my argument next thing is, will this help you ship faster in 6 months, 12 months? Or are you actually like, is there some line that exists where you actually plateau faster, even though the other person maybe took a little bit longer, but they grow even faster? And you could say, oh, well, it helps me learn the canonical way of doing things, all this kind of stuff. And my counter argument is that it's really hard to know if the canonical way, or what you perceive as the canonical way, is actually the good way to write code. You don't know. Like, that's it. That's the answer. Again, it's not about working hard or smart. You just don't know. So you have to simply fail and learn why certain things don't like lend themselves well. So if you inevitably have to switch environments, switch languages, switch, various things, you're not going to like get bamboozled into bad traps. You're not going to try to apply a certain level of thinking to a problem that's like drastically terrible for it. It's because you just don't have that that experience. You've traded it off for speed.
Yeah. Do you think that people are just kind of like, I mean, Guitar Hero kind of like got people like at least making the motions of playing guitar, even though they weren't really playing guitar.
Yeah.
But they could feel like they were playing guitar, and maybe they were actually developing like some rhythm and some of the manual dexterity and stuff to play guitar. But it's just like this kind of like simulacrum of it's like almost a parody of actual coding. If you're just hitting tab and like tapping a few things and hitting tab, and you're just tabbing through the different results, and like it I can definitely see how this is bad for new programmers and potentially bad for like more experienced programs, because you're pretty experienced and you're thinking it's bad for you. At what point do you think that people should introduce this into their workflow? Let's say they're new to software development completely, like they've been coding for like 6 months. They've solved a bunch of Project Euler problems, or they've gone through like a certification on FreeCodeCamp or something like that, and they're really still just getting their wings as developers. There's got to be a temptation to use this tool that helps you get things done. And can it feel like training wheels? Do you have kids who learned how to ride bikes? I guess would be a question.
Yeah, I do. And the funny part is that the best way to learn how to ride bikes, which has been a big change since we were kids, assuming you're approximately the same age near me,
I'm 43.
Me being 37. Okay, so there you go. You definitely have the same experience then. Training wheels. You don't do training wheels anymore. Training wheels are objectively bad. They're not just kind of bad, they're objectively bad. You don't do training wheels anymore. Striders. You get kids bikes with no pedals, and they learn to push and ride and glide on them. And what it does is it teaches them the more superior skill to learning how to bike, which is balance. Pedaling is not hard. Pedaling is something you learn in a moment. But balance is that thing you have to go do like 50 times, 100 times, 1,000 times until you're like really comfortable making turns and all that. You start hitting hills on those little striders, and kids start going back and forth. Like they get good at the act of biking, just missing the pedaling part. And so it's like that has been a huge game changer for kids learning how to bike. And so I look at Copilot more like training wheels. So like, should you learn how to, when should you use Copilot? Here's my general rule of thumb is when you should use Copilot. If Copilot's produced code that surprises you, or if you use Copilot to solve a problem because you don't know how, you probably shouldn't use it. It's not an autocomplete. It's not a Copilot. It is a pilot. You're on autopilot. Change things up. Learn how to do those things.
You're the one who's on autopilot.
Yeah.
And it's doing the actual heavy lifting. You're basically just kind of like teeing it up and like letting it. Yeah. So are you?
You should be like, it should be, like I'm not a sports ball guy, but in football, someone snaps, someone catches and lines the ball up, and someone kicks. Are you the kicker, or are you the person that sets up the ball? You want to be the kicker. You're the person doing the thing. You want someone that's just like taking out the boilerplate of getting ready to kick for you.
Yeah, that's a good analogy. So a lot of people are like really freaked out about AI and like dev and AI, and like, the AI hype cycle like has reached yet another crescendo in its many years of AI winters and AI summers. Not that it's not bringing a lot of fruit. Like I use AI all the time, and I imagine you do too, for good things, not just for things that I'm too lazy to do properly, right? There are novel things you can do with AI, with using like GPT-4, which I use a lot. Structured questions that you would never be able to get like a good Google result for, but you can potentially have like a rich conversation with it and like learn stuff. And yet a lot of people are really freaking out because they greatly overestimate this token predictor and what it can do. And, like what would be your advice to somebody who's getting into, and you probably get this question all the time. I get it like several times a day. I'm not exaggerating. Like people email me all the time. What
at least once to twice a stream, someone asked this exact question about, is the AI going to take our jobs? What's going to happen? Am I just learning a useless skill? And like, there's like 1,000 of that direction of question that are all kind of wrapped up into the answer that I'm going to attempt to give.
Okay, great.
So let's first start with momentum. The internet, we can all argue, is a phenomenal thing for business, right? Businesses have been able to do a vast amount more with less resources due to the internet existing. The internet started coming around with ARPANET in the 60s. It really started to hit its stride in the 90s when you started getting 14.4K and 56K modems. Like, how long until you really started to see the internet? Well, the first .com bust was really just a bust because we didn't have the pipeline, we didn't have the infrastructure to really handle it. And so it like the internet was around for so long, but for businesses to really adapt and start using it, which today you still have most businesses. Like most businesses don't even really have a personal website, if anything. They may have just something really, really small, and that's it. And so that took like 25 years to really get integrated into society. And so just apply that to AI. Let's just say the AI is incredible. It's not. It's like society's not changing tomorrow. It's going to take a long time. These big businesses, these big corporations, right now we're in the exploratory phase, which is here's this thing that is just really, like the culmination of the last 80 years of research into AI and this one particular branch of multi-layer perceptrons or whatever the LLM underlying tech is. And here it is. We have a business. What happens if you start letting things be steered by this? What are the consequences? What kind of guidelines do you have to have? What kind of this, that, think about the 9,000 questions that have to be set up for this to even become a business viable solution. Some people rushed in, used it, and then backed away. How many stories have you read about like people going, oh crap, we overdid this one. Not a good plan. And so they're all pulling things away. And so that's just like the business learning phase. And that's like a 10-year phase. And then at some point, it's going to be good enough to be integrated, and we're going to start seeing it as a real part of our life. So my guess is we still got like at least 10 years where things are going to be fairly the way they are today. It'll just like slowly be going. And then at some point, it's going to go from slow to fast, and now it's everywhere. So the next question is what is it going to affect? In my opinion, and I don't think this is an opinion. I think this is just a matter of fact. If you ask the AI to do something, it will do that something. Hey, paint me a picture of a crab. It produces you a crab. My counter question to you is, why was that the right crab? And you'll realize there's no reason why it couldn't have been one of 10 million other variations of the same crab. Crab is an archetype. It can be visualized in a bajillion different ways. But do the same thing with the AI and ask it, hey, give me a perfectly white canvas. It's like just not going to do it. You saw in the new Jippity 4 Omni video, the guy was just like, hey, girl and guy, I want you to sing Trading Lines By. And they just didn't do it. And he's like, no, I want you sing one line and then he sings one line. And then it didn't do it. And it's like, no, you got to stop at one line. And you need to, like, the problem is that you went from an answer can be the answer to a specific answer is the answer. And once you go from that translation layer, all of a sudden that's where the AIs completely fall off. A perfectly white canvas is virtually impossible, just like it is asking, like there's that meme that's going on the internet right now. Ask the AI, ask ChatGPT 4.0, the newest, greatest, most fantastic piece of technology ever, how many R's are in strawberry and what positions, and it was coming up with the craziest answers, even though it's like perfectly obvious to us because, again, you've gone from like a conceptual question, like what could be the next thing that comes out, to I want this precise thing. And this is why you don't program in English. You don't program in English because English is highly tolerant to like errors. I can, like, how I'm even describing this, there's 1,000 different ways I could have just said what I got done saying. And all of those would have been acceptable. English is just not a precise form of communication. It's meant to go from thought to thought, and the path we take is going to be some sort of, version of our upbringing, our culture, all that kind of stuff. And so now you're on to this idea of going from that language, which is just terrible for specific for specifications, i.e., read any legal document, to this is a legal specification for what the AI needs to do. And it utterly fails because it's not the right, that's not going to be it. And so I'm not worried about this version of AI. Could there exist a future version in which can do all these things? Sure. Why not? But let me hit you with like a different idea.
Yeah.
In the 2003 to 2005 era, you were going from a 1.3 megahertz computer to like a 2 megahertz computer. The rate of change was incredible. If you would have been living in that era, which I was, I thought, man, in 10 years, I'm going to be using 10 gigahertz computers. It's going to be crazy, all these kind of things. And guess what happened?
Yeah.
It didn't.
Yeah.
It didn't happen. It did not happen because there is a fundamental diminishing return that exists out there. And so, is this AI the worst version of AI we'll ever experience? Or is this AI actually in that golden era of growth where we're about to come up to a hard wall? We actually don't know the answer to that. And so if anyone tells you there's some future AI that's going to be magical and all powerful, maybe we don't have any evidence of that ever being true in any other form of creation right now. Like everything scales, like the economy of scale it just never goes that direction. I would love it to be real, but I don't see any evidence for it. And so, long story short, should you be worried about the AI taking your job? If you are a customer service representative in which your job is to take in a fundamentally flawed input, match it against some sort of business requirements, and then spit out another fundamentally flawed response to a person, like, yeah, that's a very dangerous place to be. If your job is to look at images like TSA, looking at what could be dangerous and not dangerous in a backpack, there very well could be a place where that starts to become a diminished return on that. Like there's these activities that you're just kind of like guessing and, oh, we need to check this backpack to see if it actually is bad or good. Like maybe those type of positions will go away because it's kind of a guessing thing. But at the end of the day, anything that's like really concrete, like I need to check the backpack now, or hey, I'm the doctor, I'm going to review the MRI, like those still have people behind them. And programming is the pinnacle of the world's most specific thing ever. Every single keyword, every single symbol, every single identifier has its exact position and its meaning, and one has a consequence into the next one. That's why it's just like such a disaster as these LLMs get longer and longer into stuff, because the consequence of being mostly right compiles just horribly. So even if they take that mostly right and are able to move it down to 1,000th of what it is today, that's still completely wrong. Right? There's no mostly right in programming. This is not horseshoes. This is not hand grenades. This is a precise mathematical expression of what your intent is. So there you go. Yeah. So I think there's just no danger in this current world for AIs taking your job. If anything, it's going to be the greatest. I think the greatest amount of jobs will be created in the next 10 years in general programming because of the amount of pure nonsense that is created. I don't know if you saw the study. I know I'm still going. Sorry, I just have so much to say about this.
This is great.
But there's this study that rated or that tracked the amount of lines changed in public open source repos in the last 4 years on GitHub. And since the advent of AI and its usage, the amount of line changes, not line additions, not line deletions, but lines in which were reworked, has gone up from once every 6 months on average to once every 2 weeks. Like the rate of change is just blowing out of the water. Things are just being changed so much faster now. They can just be wildly changed. Now, you could argue many reasons for that. Maybe in the last couple of years, so many new people have gone in, so they've kind of poisoned the well for like just constantly changing code and blah, blah, blah. You could come up with a bunch of different potential answers. But the rate of change either way is going a lot. Like how many times do you commit code and then have to rework code, especially if it's... I've been bit by ChatGPT/Copilot so many times on generating code that I thought was correct because I didn't take the strong care to create it myself, but instead just went, that looks correct, and then just got, I LGMT'd that one or whatever it is, looks good to me, and just slapped that seal on these codes over and over again, and bam, I've been hit with so many bugs because of that.
Yeah. All right, I got a last question for you. First of all, I just want to say that that is pretty much how I've been responding to people, is just that you're greatly overestimating what might come to pass, and you're also overestimating how good these tools are today because they're not that great.
Yeah.
Right. Precisely.
They're great novelty. Like the fact that it predicted you had a tie game after you said win, lose, else, and it's like tie, you're like, whoa, my goodness, this thing's magical. That's because no autocomplete's ever done that. It was magical.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean it's actually good. It's just magic. It just feels magical.
I mean, people were impressed with Eliza when it came out because it could keep a conversation going. Wow, this is great. But once you understand the trick, and once you understand the trick about how these LLMs work, it does kind of you're like, okay, it's doing good, but this is nowhere near ready for prime time. No pun intended there. All right. So last question. So if people shouldn't be, getting Copilot integrated into their workflow, if they shouldn't be just relying on these tools and assuming that these tools are going to be able to deliver them from the drudgery of having to manually code things themselves, what are the fundamentals that you think people should prioritize? Let's say people who are undergraduates studying computer science, or people that are transitioning into tech from other careers like accounting or truck driving or something like that. What are the skills that you would encourage people to prioritize investing their time into right now?
Well, so there's kind of a couple things there. One, what should you learn is a hard question, and that really depends on you, what you're interested in. For me, the biggest thing that I say is the same thing I say about working out. What's the workout that's going to make you do that workout that tomorrow you're going to do another workout? That's much better than the world's most perfect, well-thought-through workout. Because if the world's most perfect, well-thought-through workout isn't the workout that's going to make you come back, then don't do that one. What's the one that's going to make you come back? Because the biggest ally to you today will be just time in the saddle. Time in the saddle is your greatest indicator for you becoming successful at something. Just do it right now, right? You don't know what you like. You don't know what you don't like. So build stuff, read stuff. There's algorithms courses. I'm sure FreeCodeCamp has some algorithms courses. Learn a little bit of data structures, learn a little bit about networks, go learn about HTTP servers, go learn about the front end, go learn about the back end, go learn about embedded. Why not, right? Why don't you get Thorsten Ball's book, theinterpreterbook.com. Go if you're interested in how interpreters work, like how does JavaScript actually run. That's a very easy book to get into. Just these kind of simple things that just simply open your eyes and you go through the process of building. Because that's your first few years, right? If you want to be useful at programming, that should be your first 10 years, right? And I know that sounds horrible, but I don't believe there is a 6-month path to becoming some 6-figure job. I know that may have existed at one point during COVID, but that's because, we went from you don't have to be on the internet to oh my goodness, for the next year, you have to be on the internet. Obviously, that kind of changed the demand and need for people to build stuff. And some budgets got really blown out to the point where you could have that happen. So yeah, there was a time period where that may have happened, but that is not the normal. That should never be your expectation. It should be a marathon. It should not be a sprint.
Amen. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the Free Code Camp podcast, Prime. And I'm going to include links to a lot of cool Primeagean stuff, like your YouTube channels, anything you think I should, if there's a particular video that you think would be helpful for people, I can link to it. And I just want to thank you again for coming here. Everybody who listened this far into the conversation, I hope you have a fantastic week. Until next week, happy coding.